The letter arrived on a Tuesday, its edges crisp and official, slicing through the quiet hum of Ezra Cole's morning like a guillotine. It demanded $300. 000, his sister's dream trip around the world, funded by a family he'd barely spoken to in years, now calling in their debt with a venomous edge. By the third sentence of their ultimatum, Ezra's hands shook. Pay or lose everything: his apartment, his savings, his fragile freedom. Ezra stood frozen in his small San Francisco studio, the letter crumpling in his fist. At 27, he'd built a life from scraps, a graphic designer scraping by, cobbling together freelance gigs in a city that chewed up dreamers like him. His family, devout and unyielding in their rural Ohio hometown, had never understood him, not since he came out at 17 and they'd cast him out like a stain. Now, they'd found a new way to punish him: his sister Mara's lavish global adventure, funded on his dime without his consent, had racked up a debt they expected him to settle. The audacity burned. He tossed the letter onto the counter, grabbed his jacket, and headed out into the fog-choked streets, needing air, needing escape. The Mission District buzzed with life. Its murals splashed across brick walls, vendors hawking tamales, and drag queens laughing outside a neon-lit bar. Ezra's boots hit the pavement hard, his mind racing. How had it come to this? Mara, his golden child sister, had always been the family's pride, her whims indulged, her mistakes erased. When she'd begged for a year-long trip across Europe, Asia, and beyond, their parents had drained Ezra's trust fund, the one his late grandmother had left him, without so much as a phone call. Now, with Mara back and the bills unpaid, they pointed fingers at him, claiming he owed them for family loyalty. He ducked into a thrift shop, its bell jingling softly. The air smelled of old leather and lavender, a refuge from the chaos in his head. Racks of vintage clothes stretched endlessly, and Ezra wandered toward the back, seeking distraction. That's when he saw him, a guy about his age, maybe 25, with warm brown skin, a faded green hoodie, and a rainbow pin glinting on his backpack. He was rifling through a rack of flannel shirts, humming a tune Ezra vaguely recognized. Their eyes met, and the stranger flashed a smile that felt like sunlight breaking through the fog. "Hey, you look like you could use a better day," the guy said, his voice smooth and teasing. "I'm Luca. Want to help me pick out something ridiculous?" Ezra blinked, caught off guard. Sure. I'm Ezra." He hesitated, then added, "Ridiculous is my specialty." Luca laughed, holding up a garish orange blazer with lapels wide enough to double as wings. This scream main character energy, or what? Despite himself, Ezra grinned. "It screams, I'm here to ruin everyone's retinas. Try it on." They bantered, tossing quips back and forth as Luca modeled increasingly absurd outfits: a sequin vest, a tie-dye jumpsuit, a cowboy hat with a broken brim. Ezra felt the knot in his chest loosen, if only for a moment. Luca's energy was infectious, his laughter a lifeline. When Luca suggested they share a fitting room to try on a pile of clothes, just for kicks, Ezra didn't think twice. It was reckless, maybe, but it felt right. Inside the cramped fitting room, surrounded by a kaleidoscope of fabrics, Luca's demeanor shifted. He dropped to his knees, not to propose or plead, but to tie his shoelace, his fingers fumbling as he glanced up at Ezra with a shy grin. "Don't get any ideas," Luca teased, but his eyes held something deeper, something that made Ezra's pulse race. "I wasn't," Ezra lied, his voice catching. He turned away, pretending to adjust a jacket, but the air between them crackled. This wasn't just a moment, it was a spark, one that could ignite or destroy. As they left the shop, Luca's number scrawled on a receipt in Ezra's pocket. The weight of the letter crept back. His family's demands loomed like a storm cloud, threatening to drown this fleeting joy. But Luca's smile lingered in his mind, a beacon in the dark. Ezra didn't know it yet, but that chance encounter would unravel everything: his past, his fears, and the courage he'd buried deep. Ezra's phone buzzed relentlessly the next morning. Each notification a jab from his family's lawyer. The messages were curt, laced with legalese, payment plans, deadlines, threats of liens on his apartment. He silenced the phone and stared out his window at the San Francisco skyline, its jagged edges softened by fog. The city felt like a paradox, freedom and pressure tangled together, just like his life. Luca's number, still tucked in his pocket, was a temptation he wasn't ready to face. Not yet. He met Luca again by chance at a coffee shop in the Castro, the heart of the city's queer community. The place was alive with chatter, the walls plastered with flyers for drag shows and pride events. Luca sat at a corner table, sketching on a napkin, his hoodie swapped for a fitted black shirt that showed off his lean frame. When he spotted Ezra, his face lit up. "Fancy meeting you here. Thrift shop guy?" Luca called, waving him over. "You stalking me or what?" Ezra laughed, sliding into the seat across from him. "Just chasing decent coffee." "You?" "Chasing inspiration." Luca slid the napkin toward Hima's sketch of two figures in vibrant outfits, unmistakably them in the thrift shop. The lines were bold, capturing Ezra's guarded posture and Luca's playful grin with uncanny accuracy. "You're an artist?" Ezra asked, genuinely impressed. "Trying to be. I do street art. Murals. Whatever pays the bills." Luca's eyes sparkled. "You?" "Graphic design. Mostly logos for startups that crash and burn." Ezra shrugged, but Luca's gaze held his, steady and warm. They talked for hours, the conversation flowing like a river. Art, music, the city's quirks. Luca shared stories of growing up in Oakland, raised by a single mom who taught him to find beauty in chaos. Ezra, usually cagey, found himself opening up about his own fractured family, though he skirted the details of the letter. Luca listened, really listened, and when their knees brushed under the table, neither pulled away. But the weight of Ezra's reality kept intruding. That night, alone in his apartment, he finally opened the full document from the lawyer. It wasn't just about the $300. 000. His parents had added a clause: if he didn't comply, they'd out him to his conservative clients, tanking his freelance career. The threat was a knife to his throat, exploiting the one thing they'd always despised: his identity as a gay man. He felt the walls closing in, his freedom slipping through his fingers. The next day, Ezra met Luca at a mural project in the Mission. Luca was perched on a ladder, painting a vibrant scene of intertwined hands in rainbow hues. "Want to help?" he asked, tossing Ezra a brush. Ezra hesitated, then climbed up beside him. They painted in silence for a while, the rhythm of their brushes syncing. "You okay?" Luca asked, his voice soft. "You've got this." Shadow in your eyes. Ezra wanted to spill everything: the debt, the threats, the suffocating fear. Instead, he said, "Just family stuff. You know how it is." Luca nodded, but his gaze lingered, searching. Family can be a battlefield, but you don't have to fight alone. The words hit harder than Ezra expected. He focused on the mural, dipping his brush in crimson paint, but his mind was elsewhere. His family wasn't just fighting him, they were trying to erase him. And yet, here was Luca, a near stranger, offering a lifeline without even knowing the stakes. That evening, they grabbed tacos from a food truck and sat on a curb, the city pulsing around them. Luca's laughter was a melody, but Ezra's thoughts kept drifting to the letter. When Luca reached for his hand, their fingers brushing, Ezra pulled back instinctively. I can't," he stammered, hating the fear in his voice. Luca didn't push. "Whenever you're ready," he said, his voice gentle but firm. "I'm not going anywhere." Ezra wanted to believe him, but the letter's shadow loomed larger than ever. His family's demands weren't just about money, they were a calculated strike at his soul. And as he watched Luca's silhouette against the neon glow, he wondered if he could ever outrun their reach. Ezra's apartment felt smaller each day, the walls pressing in as the deadline loomed. The lawyer's latest email was blunt: pay $50. 000 by next week, or they'd start legal proceedings. His savings? Barely $10. 000 mocked him from his bank account. He hadn't told Luca about the debt, but every time they met, the secret gnawed at him. Luca's easy smiles and gentle touches were a refuge. But Ezra couldn't shake the fear that his family's vendetta would taint this fragile new connection. They started spending more time together, meeting at art galleries, hole-in-the-wall diners, or Luca's favorite spot, a rooftop overlooking the Bay Bridge. One night, under a sky streaked with stars, Luca handed Ezra a sketchbook. "Open it," he said, his voice tinged with nervous excitement. Inside were drawings of San Francisco's underbelly, graffiti-covered alleys, drag queens mid-performance, couples stealing kisses in doorways. One page stopped Ezra cold, a portrait of him, eyes haunted but fierce, standing against a backdrop of shattered chains. "That's how I see you," Lucas said quietly, "like you're fighting something bigger than yourself." Ezra's throat tightened. "You don't know the half of it." "Then tell me," Luca urged, his hand grazing Ezra's. "Let me in." But Ezra couldn't. Not yet. Instead, he kissed Luca, a desperate, fleeting press of lips that said everything he couldn't voice. Luca kissed back, soft but sure, and for a moment, the world fell away. They stood there, tangled in each other, the city humming below. But when they pulled apart, the weight of Ezra's secret settled back in. The next day, his sister Mara called. Her voice was saccharine, dripping with false concern. "Ezra, you know we didn't mean for this to happen. Just pay the deposit, and we'll figure out the rest." She didn't mention the trust fund they'd plundered or the years of silence. When he asked why they'd targeted him, her tone sharpened. "You owe us. You left us. You chose your lifestyle." The word cut deep, a reminder of every sermon, every cold shoulder, every door slammed in his face. He hung up, his hands shaking, and called Luca. They met at a dive bar, the kind with sticky floors and jukebox blues. Luca sensed the storm in Ezra's eyes and didn't pry. Just ordered them beers and listened as Ezra let slip fragments of the truth: his family's betrayal, the debt, the threats. He stopped short of mentioning their homophobic ultimatum, too ashamed to admit how it still controlled him. Luca reached across the table, his fingers lacing through Ezra's. "They don't get to define you," he said fiercely. "You're more than their bullshit." Ezra wanted to believe it, but doubt clung to him like damp fog. The bar's neon lights flickered, casting shadows on Luca's face, and Ezra felt a surge of longing to run, to fight, to be free. But freedom came at a cost, and he wasn't sure he could pay it. That night, alone, he scoured his options. Selling his apartment would cover part of the debt, but it was his only anchor in a city that demanded everything. He could fight the family in court, but their lawyer was a shark, and Ezra's resources were a minnow. The thought of losing his career, his clients, his reputation made his stomach churn. And yet, Luca's words echoed, "You're more than their bullshit." The next morning, Ezra found a new email from his parents. It wasn't about the money this time. It was a photo of him and Luca, taken outside the thrift shop, their hands brushing. The caption read, "We know who he is. Pay, or we tell everyone." Ezra's heart stopped. They weren't just after his money, they were after his life, his love, his truth. And now, Luca was in their crosshairs. Ezra stared at the photo on his screen, his pulse hammering. The image was grainy, but unmistakable: him and Luca outside the thrift shop, caught in a moment of unguarded connection. His family's message was a gut punch. They'd hired someone to follow him, to weaponize his happiness. The threat to out him to his clients was bad enough, but dragging Luca into their vendetta was a new low. He slammed his laptop shut, his breath ragged, and paced his apartment. He couldn't let them touch Luca. Not now. Not ever. He met Luca that afternoon at a park in Dolores Heights, the city sprawling below them. Luca was sprawled on a blanket, sketching the skyline, his rainbow pin catching the sunlight. Ezra wanted to tell him everything, to warn him, but the words stuck in his throat. Instead, he sat beside him, their shoulders brushing, and tried to anchor himself in the moment. You're quiet today, Lucas said, setting down his pencil. What's going on? Ezra forced a smile. Just work stress. Deadlines. You know. Luca didn't buy it. He turned, his brown eyes searching Ezra's face. You don't have to carry it alone. Ezra. Whatever it is. The kindness cracked something in Ezra. He wanted to spill it all, the debt, the photo, the fear that his family would ruin them both. But he couldn't drag Luca into this mess. Not when Luca's life is art. His joy, his freedom felt like a light Ezra didn't deserve. They spent the day together, wandering through the park, sharing stories, stealing glances. Luca talked about his dream of a solo art show, his voice alive with passion. Ezra listened, memorizing the way Luca's hands moved, the way his laughter carried on the breeze. But the photo loomed in his mind, a ticking bomb. That night, Ezra called a lawyer friend, Mia, who specialized in family disputes. Over coffee at a dimly lit cafe, he laid out the situation minus the photo, still too raw to share. Mia's face hardened as she read the letters. They're bluffing about the lien, she said, tapping the papers. But the trust fund, that's trickier. If they had access, they might have legally drained it. You need to fight this. Ezra, get a lawyer. Build a case. And if I can't afford one? He asked, his voice tight. Mia leaned forward. Then you negotiate. But don't let them bully you into silence. They're counting on your shame. Shame. The word burned. It wasn't just about the money, it was about who he was, who he loved. He thanked Mia and left, her words echoing alongside Luca's. You're more than their bullshit. The next day, Ezra found a voicemail from his father. We're coming to San Francisco. His father's voice growled. You'll meet us, or we'll make this public. All of it. The threat was clear, they'd expose him. And now they'd do it in person. Ezra's stomach churned. He couldn't keep running, but facing them felt like walking into a trap. He texted Luca, asking to meet at the rooftop. When Luca arrived, his smile faltered at the sight of Ezra's pale face. What happened? Luca asked, stepping close. Ezra took a breath, the truth clawing its way out. My family, they're coming here. They're trying to control me. Luca, because of who I am. Because of us. Luca's jaw tightened, but he didn't flinch. Let them come. We'll face them together. Ezra shook his head, fear gripping him. You don't know what they're capable of. Then show me, Lucas said, his voice fierce. I'm not scared of them, Ezra. And you shouldn't be either. For the first time, Ezra felt a flicker of hope. Lucas' defiance was a shield, but the battle was coming, and Ezra wasn't sure he could protect them both. The meeting was set for a sterile conference room in a downtown law office, the kind of place that smelled of coffee and desperation. Ezra's parents arrived with Mara, their faces carved from the same stone-cold judgment he remembered from his teenage years. His father, broad and imposing, wore a suit that screamed control. His mother's eyes darted, avoiding Ezra's gaze. Mara, draped in designer clothes from her trip, smirked as if she'd already won. Ezra sat across from them, flanked by Mia, his lawyer friend, who'd agreed to represent him pro bono. Luca waited outside, his presence a quiet strength Ezra clung to. You've had your fun, his father began, voice low and cutting. Now pay what you owe. This family gave you everything. Ezra's fists clenched under the table. You took my trust fund. You funded Mara's trip without asking me. And now you're threatening my life. Mara leaned forward, her voice dripping with disdain. You abandoned us. Ezra, you don't get to play victim because you chose this. Her eyes flicked toward the door, where Luca waited. Mia cut in, her tone sharp. Legally, Ezra owes nothing. The trust was in his name. You accessed it without consent. That's theft. His father's face reddened. We're a family. He owes us loyalty. Loyalty. Ezra snapped, his voice breaking. You kicked me out at 17 for being gay. You don't get to demand loyalty now. The room fell silent. the air thick with tension. His mother finally spoke, her voice trembling. We just want what's best for you. This lifestyle isn't right. Ezra's heart twisted, but he held their gaze. What's not right is you trying to erase me. I'm done letting you. Mia slid a folder across the table documents proving the trust fund's misuse. We can settle this quietly, she said, or we can take it to court. Your call. His parents exchanged glances, their confidence cracking. Mara, however, scoffed. You think you can scare us? We have photos. Ezra, you and that boy. We'll ruin you. Ezra's blood ran cold, but he forced himself to stay steady. Do it, he said, voice low. Out me. I'm not hiding anymore. The bluff hung in the air. His father's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Mia leaned forward. Threatening to out someone is extortion. You're walking a dangerous line. The meeting ended with no resolution, just a promise to reconvene. Ezra left the room, his legs shaky, and found Luca outside, leaning against the wall. Without a word, Luca pulled him into a hug, strong and unwavering. You did good, Luca whispered. Ezra clung to him, the fear still pulsing but lighter now. They're not done, he murmured. Then neither are we, Luca said, his voice fierce. That night, Ezra and Luca sat on the rooftop, the city glittering below. Ezra finally told Luca everything: the photo, the threats, the weight of his family's hatred. Luca listened, his hand steady in Ezra's. They can't break you, Luca said. Not if you don't let them. Ezra looked at him, the man who'd stumbled into his life and refused to leave. What if I'm not strong enough? You are, Luca said, his eyes burning with conviction. And I'm right here. The next morning, Ezra woke to a new email from his parents. They'd backed off the immediate payment demand, but insisted on a family meeting at their terms. In Ohio. It was a power play, a chance to drag him back to their world. Ezra's first instinct was to refuse. But Luca's words echoed, we'll face them together. For the first time, he felt ready to fight, not just for himself, but for the life he was building with Luca. Ezra and Luca boarded a plane to Ohio, the decision as heavy as the clouds outside the window. Ezra hadn't set foot in his hometown in a decade, and the thought of facing his family on their turf made his stomach churn. Luca, sensing his tension, squeezed his hand during takeoff. We've got this, he said, his voice a steady anchor. Ezra nodded, but the dread lingered, a shadow he couldn't shake. They landed in Columbus, the air crisp and heavy with memories. The drive to Ezra's childhood home was a blur of flat fields and faded billboards, each mile pulling him back to the boy who'd fled at 17. Luca kept the mood light, cracking jokes about the lack of decent coffee shops. But his eyes never left Ezra, watchful and protective. The house hadn't changed: white siding, a manicured lawn, a cross on the door. Ezra's parents greeted them with stiff politeness, Mara lounging in the living room like a queen. The tension was suffocating, every word laced with unspoken accusations. His father wasted no time. We're willing to forgive the debt, he said, if you come back. Get help. Fix this. His eyes flicked to Luca, who stood tall beside Ezra. Fix me. Ezra's voice trembled with rage. You mean stop being who I am? His mother wrung her hands. It's not natural, Ezra. We just want you to be saved. Luca's hand found Ezra's. A silent vow. He doesn't need saving, Luca said, his voice calm but razor sharp. He's not broken. Mara laughed, a cruel edge to it. You're both delusional. You think you can just live like this and be happy. Ezra's resolve hardened. I'm happier with him than I ever was here. The argument escalated, voices rising, old wounds splitting open. His parents threw Bible verses. Ezra countered with years of pain. Luca stood by him, unflinching, his presence a shield. When Mara brought up the photo again, threatening to send it to Ezra's clients, Luca didn't blink. Go ahead, he said. We're not hiding. The standoff ended with no agreement. Just raw anger and a fractured family. Ezra and Luca left, the door slamming behind them. In the rental car, Ezra broke, tears streaming as he gripped the wheel. Luca pulled him close, letting him sob. "You were incredible," Luca whispered. "You stood up to them." Ezra shook his head. "I don't know if it was enough." "It was," Luca said. "You're free now. They don't own you." Back in San Francisco, Ezra felt the shift. The fear that had chained him was loosening, replaced by a fragile hope. He and Luca spent days together, painting, laughing, building something real. But the threat of the photo lingered. A final test. Ezra decided to take control. He contacted his clients himself, coming out on his terms, explaining his family's manipulation. Most stood by him, their support a quiet victory. One night, on the rooftop, Luca handed Ezra a new sketch-portrait of them, hands intertwined, standing against a city ablaze with color. "This is us," Luca said, "no matter what they throw at you." Ezra kissed him, slow and sure, the weight of his past fading. The fight wasn't over, but for the first time, he believed he could win. Ezra's life began to stitch itself back together, thread by fragile thread. His client's support gave him breathing room, and Mia's legal work kept his family's threats at bay. The $300,000 debt still loomed, but Mia uncovered evidence that the trust fund's misuse could be challenged in court. It wasn't a guarantee, but it was hoping a chance to reclaim what was stolen. He and Luca grew closer, their bond a quiet rebellion against the world's cruelty. They moved in together, a small apartment in the Mission filled with Luca's sketches and Ezra's designs. One evening, as they painted a mural on their living room wall, Luca dropped to his knees, not to tie a shoelace, but to pull Ezra into a kiss. "This," Luca said, breathless, "is worth fighting for." Ezra nodded, his heart full. "You're worth fighting for." The final blow came unexpectedly. Mara, desperate to save face, leaked the photo to a local Ohio paper, framing Ezra as the ungrateful son who'd abandoned his family. The story spread online, twisted and vicious. Ezra braced for the fallout, but San Francisco's community rallied. Friends, clients, even strangers flooded his inbox with support, sharing their own stories of rejection and resilience. Luca organized a mural event, turning the city's walls into a canvas of love and defiance. Each stroke a middle finger to Ezra's family. One night, at a gallery showcasing Luca's art, Ezra stood before a crowd, his voice steady. "My family tried to break me," he said, Luca's hand in his. "They took my money, my trust, my peace. But they couldn't take my truth. And they can't take this." He gestured to Luca, to the room, to the city that had become his home. The crowd cheered, and Luca pulled him close, whispering, "You're unstoppable." Months later, the court ruled in Ezra's favor. The trust fund was partially restored, enough to secure his future without caving to his family's demands. His parents and Mara faded into silence, their power over him broken. Ezra didn't forgive them, but he let them go, their weight no longer his to carry. On a quiet evening, Ezra and Luca stood on their rooftop, the city alive below. Luca slipped a ring onto Ezra's finger, a simple band, etched with a tiny rainbow. "Not a proposal," Luca said, grinning. "Just a promise. I'm with you, always." Ezra kissed him, the stars above them brighter than ever. His family had tried to mortgage his life for loving men, but Ezra had paid a different price: courage, truth, and love. And in Luca's arms, he knew it was worth every cent.